Hi, to go with this week's unit on sexual assault, I wanted to talk a little bit about sex trafficking. This has become a rather hot topic, especially in the area we live in, as the trucking industry and the truck stops are places where people can be exploited for sex trafficking. So what exactly is sex trafficking? So it's really regarded as a form of modern day slavery. Human trafficking is not only sex trafficking, but sex trafficking is a big part of it. And I've got the definition there for you: the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, obtaining, patronizing, or soliciting of a person for the purpose of a commercial sex act. And it does involve the use of force, fraud, or coercion to make an adult compliant in commercial sex acts. That coercion can come in a lot of different ways. Very often, people that are sex trafficking will get their victims to take drugs and get them hooked on drugs so that they really feel like they can't leave because they're too dependent on the substance. So if we're looking at the risks, very often the risks are so similar to people that have been involved in child abuse and neglect, sexual violence, and gang violence. So if someone is growing up in an abusive situation, they can be easier to prey on to become victims. Most victims are women and girls, but men and boys can be victims as well. And this sometimes surprises people. I think we all have a stereotype in our mind of what someone soliciting commercial sex is and what they look like. And they can include all races, ethnicities, sexual orientations, gender identities, and income levels. So there is no one typical victim of sex trafficking. So who's most at risk? People that are in unstable living situations. Sometimes they're promised a much better living setup, so they think that this is a good idea until they realize what it is they're expected to do. People who have already been sexually abused or victims of domestic violence in the past can also be at risk. People that have already been involved in the juvenile justice system or child welfare system can be very vulnerable. Undocumented immigrants, and this makes sense when you think about it, because very often these people are fearful of being deported, and they think that maybe the people that are wooing them into sex trafficking will protect them. And then lastly, people who are addicted to drugs and alcohol already do become more vulnerable to being trafficked. So a lot of times the victims, they're trapped and controlled through different things. It can be assault, it could be threats against them or someone they care about. They'll promise them the world sometimes. And then also isolating them from their family and friends makes it easier for them to be controlled. And sometimes, especially in the case of an undocumented immigrant, if they owe the person that got them over the border, they might be stuck in a cycle where they're never going to be able to pay that person back. And just because someone is not being physically transported between places they're victimized does not mean that it's not sex trafficking. So there's different things we can do to prevent people falling into the trafficking. For one thing, we need to have strong communities and strong families. And as we know, this is a problem with a lot of societies' ills, the lack of a supportive community. So we need to make our neighborhoods safer. If you're in a safer neighborhood, chances are someone's not going to try to come in and find someone to exploit. We need to help our medical personnel to recognize the signs of sex trafficking. Someone that maybe is afraid to talk about their situation, someone who seems to be dominated by another person in the room. And then also we need to find a way to reduce the demand for commercial sex. If there was no demand, we wouldn't have this issue. And who are the traffickers? Again, just like victims, there's no particular type that fits all. They can be any nationality, they can be any gender. People are sometimes surprised if women are involved in controlling others through sex trafficking. Any sexual orientation, and this can be people that we know or total strangers. It might be someone who's in our family, might be someone that we think we're romantically involved and we're just being set up to be used. So there's no one size fits all. And then I've also included some resources for help. The National Coalition for Human Trafficking Resource Center, and then Preventing Trafficking from the CDC. There's also a human trafficking hotline that I've put the number there for, and also different areas do have special homes for people that are coming out of sex trafficking. And depending on the area you live in, you may be aware of that.